Archivist Mira Osch had been keeping the silence for 11 years, and in 11 years, she had never once had to wake her supervisor in the middle of a shift. She was going to have to wake her supervisor in the middle of this shift. The signal had arrived at 3:47 station time, which was the specific hour of the monitoring cycle when attentiveness was most expensive and most necessary, the hour when the arc of the shift had passed its midpoint, and the end was not yet close enough to provide the forward momentum that made the final hours manageable. Mira had been at her post. She was always at her post. 11 years of overnight monitoring shifts at the Galactic Silence Archive's primary listening station had built in her the specific quality of someone who did not require external enforcement of their own standards, because the standards had long since become internal, and the internal version was more demanding than any external version would have been. The monitoring array showed a transmission originating from the Sol system. She looked at it for a moment. Then she pulled up the Sol system's entry in the archive's observation register, because the observation register was the first reference point for any flagged transmission, and she always followed the correct sequence, because the correct sequence existed for reasons that were more important than her own efficiency. The Sol system's entry was long. She read the summary first. The summary read, Earth, third planet Sol system, outer Orion arm, intelligent species, designation Homo sapiens, capable of interstellar communication for approximately 204 years, member of the Galactic Communication Accord since year 61 of the Silence. Flag status, standing observation. Reason for flag, Earth has maintained consistent monitoring of the Silence Archive's restricted transmission channels since year 14 of the Silence. Species has never transmitted on those channels. Flag placed for potential first transmission event. Flag standing for 186 years. 186 years. She reached for her supervisor's comm. Supervisor Veth answered on the third signal. Mira told her the Sol system flag had activated. She told her there was a transmission incoming on the archive's restricted channel. She told her it had been standing for 186 years. Supervisor Veth was quiet for one moment. Then she told Mira to record everything, and she would be there in 4 minutes. The transmission was still transmitting. It was not a compressed data burst. It was a real-time broadcast on the restricted channel, sent at a speed that assumed a living listener at the other end. Mira had the recording running from the moment the flag activated, because the archive's protocols required continuous recording of all activity on the restricted channels, but she had not yet listened to it. She had been reading the observation register, following the correct sequence. The correct sequence existed for reasons that were more important than her own urgency. Her supervisor was 4 minutes away. The transmission was already underway. She listened. The voice was human. She knew human voices. The archive maintained reference recordings of every species in the Accord, and she had memorized them the way she had memorized everything the archive required, which was completely and precisely, and in a way that was available to her without effort. Human voices had a specific tonal range, a particular quality in the upper register, a rhythm that was slightly irregular compared to most species, because human speech had evolved in an environment where exact precision of timing was less critical than the emotional information carried in the variation. She recognized it in the first syllable. The voice was calm. This was the first thing she noted, not the content, the quality. A calm voice on the restricted channel of the Galactic Silence Archive at 3:47 station time was something she had not encountered before and did not have a reference for, because she had never encountered any voice on the restricted channel at any time. And the first one was calm in the specific way of someone who has thought about this moment for a very long time and has decided that calm was the right register for it. The transmission was in Accord standard, clear, unambiguous. She could hear it as she read the observation register entry for the fourth time. It said, "This is Dr. Saren Cole, speaking on behalf of Earth's Interstellar Communication Council. We are transmitting on Archive Channel 7, which we understand is the Silence Archive's primary monitoring frequency. We want to begin by acknowledging the silence itself and why it has been kept and what it has cost. We know what happened 200 years ago. We've spent a long time studying it. We've spent a long time thinking about whether there was something worth saying. We think there is. But we wanted to say the rig. Thing first before we said anything else, and the right thing first is this: we heard you, all of you. 200 years of silence is the loudest thing we've ever listened to. We know what you decided and why you decided it, and we want you to know that we understand. We're not speaking to end the silence. We're speaking to say that we were listening the whole time. What happens next is your decision. We'll be here." The transmission ended. Mira sat with it. Her supervisor arrived at 3:51, 4 minutes after the call, which was exactly what she had estimated. Supervisor Veth was a Kelvari, which meant she moved with the particular efficiency of a species that processed incoming information in 3 parallel streams simultaneously and arrived at conclusions faster than most species could form the question. She crossed to Mira's station, read the transmission log, and was quiet for a time that Mira recognized as unusual. Veth was not usually quiet. Quiet from Veth meant the 3 parallel processing streams had reached a point where none of them had a ready conclusion. Veth asked, "Did you record the full transmission?" Mira told her yes. Veth asked, "Have you begun the incident report?" Mira told her no. She told her she had been listening to the transmission. She told her she had listened to it 3 times. Veth looked at her with the expression Mira recognized as the Kelvari version of a question that was more than the words it was formed from. Mira told her, "I needed to hear it correctly before I wrote it down." Veth was quiet again. Then she told Mira to begin the report when she was ready. She told her there was no standard form for this event because the archive had never needed one. She told her to use the general transmission record format and note the deviations from standard procedure wherever they applied. She told her she would be at the adjacent station, and Mira should call her when the report was drafted. She crossed to the adjacent station and began her own set of notifications, because a first transmission event on the restricted channel required escalation to the archive's governing council, and the governing council had 7 members on 4 different planets, and waking them at 3:51 station time was going to require a specific kind of framing that Veth was, in Mira's assessment, better equipped to provide than anyone else in the facility. Mira opened the general transmission record form. She read the first field. It asked for the transmission's classification category. She looked at the drop-down options. She read through all of them. She closed the drop-down. She opened it again. She read through them again. She closed it. There was no category for this. She wrote a note in the field. Transmission does not fit existing classification categories. Recommended, create new category. Suggested designation, Accord class first address. See attached transcript and analysis. She moved to the next field. It asked for the transmission's content summary in no more than 100 words. She typed for 4 minutes. She deleted what she had typed. She typed again. She deleted again. The problem was not that she did not know what Earth had transmitted. The problem was that a 100-word summary of what Earth had transmitted was going to lose the thing that made the transmission what it was. The transmission was 37 seconds long. Earth had taken 200 years to say 37 seconds of words. A 100-word summary was going to take those 37 seconds and extract from them only the propositional content, which was that Earth was speaking, and Earth was acknowledging the silence, and Earth was deferring the next step to the other species of the Accord. That was accurate. It was also insufficient. A 100-word summary was going to describe what Earth had transmitted without describing what it had been. She wrote, Earth transmitted a 37-second address on Archive Channel 7 at 3:47 station time. The address acknowledged the galactic silence, expressed understanding of its origins and purpose, confirmed 200 years of active listening on the part of Earth's Communication Monitoring Division, and explicitly declined to define the terms of what followed. The address stated that Earth had been listening and wished that to be known, and that subsequent decisions regarding communication resumption were the prerogative of the other Accord species. The address was calm. It did not make demands. She looked at that last sentence. She left it. It was accurate, and it was the sentence that mattered most, and she was not going to cut it to save a word count. The notification alerts began at 4:09, not from the Governing Council, from the other listening stations. The archive maintained 7 primary monitoring stations across the Accord's coverage area. All 7 had been running on their standard overnight protocols when the Earth transmission arrived. All 7 had ordered it simultaneously, because Archive Channel 7 broadcast across the full Accord spectrum, and every station received it at the same time, offset only by the light travel delay to their respective positions. The first notification came from Station 3, which was in the Vorath system, and was staffed by an archivist named Sale Keth, whom Mira had met twice at the annual coordination session and knew to be methodical and precise, and not given to unnecessary communication. Sale's notification contained 4 words, "I heard it too." The second notification came from Station 5, which was in the outer care system, staffed by an archivist she had not met. This notification was longer. It contained an analysis of the transmission's frequency encoding, which confirmed that Earth had transmitted using the archive's own channel authentication codes, which were updated every 6 months on a rotating schedule and were not public information. Earth had been monitoring the channel closely enough to track the authentication code updates. Earth had been doing this for 186 years. She read that notification twice. She went to find Supervisor Veth. She told her about the authentication codes. Veth was in the middle of a communication with one of the Governing Council members, and she held up one hand, which was the Kelvari gesture for a moment, and finished the sentence she had been speaking, and then turned to Mira and asked her to repeat what she had told her. Mira repeated it. Earth had been monitoring the archive's authentication codes for 186 years. The codes rotated every 6 months. Earth had tracked approximately 372 rotations without transmitting once. They had maintained access to the authentication protocols for 186 years of silence, waiting. Veth was quiet with both of her faces, which was the most serious kind of quiet a Kelvari could be. She told Mira, that means they could have transmitted at any point in the last 186 years. Mira told her, yes. Veth told her, they chose not to. Mira told her, yes. Veth looked at her for a long moment. Then she told her, write that down, in the report. Whatever you were going to say, write that down too. Mira went back to her station. She wrote it down. She wrote, Earth has maintained authentication access to Archive Channel 7 for 186 years without transmitting. This access was not disclosed to the archive. Its existence was discovered through analysis of the transmission's frequency encoding by Station 5. The implication is that Earth has had the technical capability to transmit on the archive's primary channel for 186 years, and chose not to do so until the transmission recorded at 3:47 today. She read that paragraph back. She wrote below it, I want to note in this report something that is outside the standard incident record framework, but which I believe is relevant to how this transmission should be understood. I have been an archivist at this facility for 11 years. My work is to maintain the record of the silence. I have spent 11 years understanding what the silence is, and why it was chosen, and what it protects. The silence was chosen because the last species to transmit freely believed they were helping, and 4 billion people died because communication without understanding is not communication. The silence has been kept for 200 years because the species of the Accord decided, collectively and without formal agreement, that the cost of speaking wrong was too high. Earth did not transmit for 186 years, during which time they maintained the technical capability to do so. When they transmitted, they did not say anything about themselves. They did not announce intentions or capabilities or requests. They said, "We heard you. We know what it cost. What happens next is your decision." She stopped. She read the draft back from the beginning. Then she wrote, "I have thought about what to call this transmission. The incident form asks for a classification category, and I have noted that no existing category applies. I want to suggest a name for the new category, and the name I want to suggest is the acknowledgement. Not the first words, not the breaking of the silence, not the Earth transmission. The acknowledgement. Because what Earth did was not speak first. What Earth did was acknowledge that others had spoken first, 200 years ago, and that their words had been heard, and that the silence that followed was not emptiness but meaning. Earth acknowledged the silence before they broke it. Earth said, "We understand what you said when you said nothing." That is not a species speaking into a void and hoping for a response. That is a species that spent 200 years listening until they understood what the void was saying, and then found words for it. She filed TA.E report at 5:22, 1 hour and 31 minutes after the transmission. In 11 years, she had never taken that long to file a routine incident report. This was not a routine incident report. She had needed the time. The Governing Council convened at 800 for an emergency session, which Mira attended via the archive's communication relay. She was there in an observational capacity, as the archivist of record for the incident. She was not expected to speak. Council member Tor Vaughn, who had been on the Governing Council for 30 years, and who had the specific bearing of someone who had been waiting for this conversation for most of those 30 years, opened the session by reading the transmission aloud. He read it slowly, the way important things should be read, and when he finished the room was quiet. Then he read the paragraph from Mira's report about the 186 years of maintained authentication access without transmission. Then he was quiet again for longer. Council member Arrows Fell, who was younger than Tor Vaughn and asked better questions, told the council she wanted to understand something before they discussed the question of response. She told them she wanted to understand why Earth had waited this long, and she was not asking rhetorically. She was asking because the answer to that question was going to determine what kind of response was appropriate, and she wanted the archivist on the record to address it if she was able. Mira had not expected to be asked anything. She was in an observational capacity, but the council member had asked, and the question was the right question, and Mira had spent the last 3 hours thinking about nothing else. She told the council what she had written in the report about the acknowledgement. She told them that her assessment was that Earth had not waited because they were uncertain whether to speak. She told them Earth had waited because they were uncertain whether they understood the silence well enough to speak into it correctly. She told them the distinction was significant. Uncertainty about whether to speak was hesitation born from timidity or self-interest. Uncertainty about whether you understood enough to speak correctly was something different. It was the discipline to wait until the words were right, not merely until the moment was right. She told them, Earth did not say we are ready to speak. Earth said we think we're ready. That qualifier is the whole thing. A species that has been certain of itself for 186 years does not say we think. Earth is telling us they are not certain they have it right. They are telling us they are willing to try and willing to be corrected. She paused. She told them, that is what the silence was waiting for, not a species that was certain, a species that was honest about its uncertainty. The council was quiet for a long time. Then Torvald told her, "That is the clearest analysis I have heard in 30 years on this council." He told her, "You should write that in the report too." She told him it was already in the report. He told her he was glad. The governing council voted at 9:41. The vote was on whether to open a response channel to Earth's transmission. The result was 4 in favor, 2 abstaining, 1 opposed. The one opposed gave a statement for the record which Mira noted and transcribed, because she noted and transcribed everything that went into the archive. The statement said that the silence had protected the Accord for 200 years, and that opening any response channel carried risk that could not be fully quantified, and that caution remained appropriate. The statement was correct on all 3 points. The council acknowledged that it was correct on all 3 points. They voted to open the channel anyway. Because Earth had said, "What happens next is your decision." And the council had decided. The response transmission was drafted by Council Member Arrows Fell, who had asked the right question, and reviewed by the full council over 2 hours, and transmitted on Archive Channel 7 at 12:07 station time, 9 hours and 20 minutes after Earth had spoken. It was short. Mira received a copy for the archive record at 12:09 and read it twice. It said, "We heard you too. Thank you for waiting until you understood. We were not sure anyone would. We have questions. We expect you do as well. We believe that is the right place to start." Mira read it twice. Then she read Earth's original transmission again and placed them side by side in the archive record, formatted as a dialogue, which was what they were. The first dialogue on Archive Channel 7 in 200 years. She sat with that for a moment. She thought about 200 years of recorded silence, 11 years of her own contribution to that record, the specific quality of a job that asks you to maintain something by not acting, by noting absence rather than presence, by being the witness to the nothing rather than the something. She thought about 3:47 station time, and a calm voice, and 37 seconds of words that had taken 200 years to arrive at. She thought about the thing she had written at the end of her report, the thing that was outside the standard framework, the sentence she had almost cut and had decided to leave because it was accurate and accuracy was the thing she kept, and the thing she kept was the thing that mattered. The sentence was, "Earth said we think we're ready. That qualifier is the whole thing." She had been keeping the silence for 11 years. She had maintained the record of nothing, faithfully, in small, precise handwriting, the way her training had required. She had never expected to be the one who wrote down what the nothing became when something finally came. She filed the complete archive record at 1300. Transmission, analysis, council session, response, all of it, in the correct sequence, in the correct format, with the paragraphs outside the standard framework clearly marked as such, so that whoever read it later would know which parts were the record and which parts were her. She had been at her post for 9 hours and 13 minutes by the time the record was complete. She had never once left the post. That was also in the record. She turned off her terminal at 13:19 and sat in the quiet of the monitoring room for a few minutes before beginning the end-of-shift walkthrough. The room was the same room it always was. The array was running its standard sweeps. Archive Channel 7 was open and quiet, and the archive's authentication codes were embedded in the carrier signal the same way they always were. But the record was different now. The record showed 200 years of nothing and then 2 voices, and then something that Mira had named, with the care she gave to everything she named, the acknowledgement. Earth had not ended the silence. Earth had told the silence what it had meant, and then waited to hear if they had understood it correctly. She had spent 11 years maintaining the record of the nothing. She understood now that the nothing had always been something. She had just been waiting for the words that described it correctly. Earth had found them. That was worth noting. She noted it. If this one stayed with you, it stayed with you because of the qualifier. We think we're ready. Not we are ready. Not we demand. Not we have decided. 200 years of silence, and the thing Earth finally said was 3 words of honest uncertainty followed by an offer. Every species in the Accord had been waiting for the species brave enough to speak. What they found out was they had also been waiting for the species humble enough to admit they might not have it perfectly right. Those turned out to be the same species. They always do. Stay human.